"Who are you?" Margaret Phillips asked her husband of 60 years as they sat in the third row of Elvis's Las Vegas concert. Adam felt his heart shatter as he looked into the confused eyes of the woman who had shared his life, his dreams, and his bed for 6 decades but no longer recognized his face. At 85, Margaret's Alzheimer's had progressed to the point where she lived in a fog of confusion, unable to remember her own name most days, unable to recognize the man who had loved her since they were teenagers in small-town Mississippi. Adam had brought her to this concert as a desperate last attempt to reach the woman he was losing piece by piece, because music was the only thing that seemed to penetrate the darkness that had consumed her mind. What Adam didn't know was that Margaret had a secret connection to Elvis Presley that predated their marriage, a connection she had buried for 60 years but that was about to resurface in the most unexpected way. As Elvis took the stage and began singing "Love Me Tender," something miraculous happened in Margaret's eyes. The fog cleared, her posture straightened, and she grabbed Adam's hand with a strength she hadn't shown in months. But to understand why this moment would prove that love transcends memory, and that music can unlock doors that medicine cannot reach, you need to know about the promise Adam made to Margaret on their wedding day. A promise he was finally ready to break. It was November 8, 1975, at the Las Vegas International Hotel. Elvis was performing his evening show for an audience that included high rollers, celebrities, and devoted fans from around the world. But in the third row center section sat 2 people who were fighting a battle far more devastating than anything happening on stage. Margaret Phillips, 85 years old, sat stiffly in her seat, her silver hair perfectly styled by the nurse who had helped her dress that afternoon. She wore the blue dress that Adam had always said brought out her eyes, though she no longer remembered him buying it for her on their 50th wedding anniversary. Adam Phillips, 87, sat beside the woman who had been his entire world for 6 decades, watching her stare blankly at the stage as if she had never seen live entertainment before. Earlier that day, Margaret had asked him 14 times who he was, why he was in her house, and when her real husband was coming home. Each question was a knife to his heart, but Adam had answered with the same patient gentleness he had shown for the 3 years since her diagnosis. The journey to this moment had begun on a sunny morning in June 1954, when 19-year-old Margaret Roberts was working as a receptionist at Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee. She was saving money for college, dreaming of becoming a teacher, and completely unaware that she was about to witness music history in the making. On the day that would change everything, a young truck driver named Elvis Presley walked into the studio with $4 in his pocket and a dream of recording a song for his mother's birthday. Margaret had seen many hopeful musicians come through those doors, but there was something different about this shy, polite boy with the slicked-back hair and nervous smile. When he stammered through his explanation about wanting to record "My Happiness" for his mother Gladys, Margaret felt something stir in her chest that she had never experienced before. Elvis was only 18, just a year younger than herself, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made her forget to breathe. "That'll be $4, Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elvis nodded and carefully counted out the money, his hands trembling slightly with nerves. As he headed toward the recording booth, he paused and looked back at her. "I'm sorry I didn't catch your name," he said with that slight smile that would later make millions of women swoon. "Margaret," she replied. "Margaret Roberts." "That's a beautiful name," Elvis said. Maybe when I'm done recording you could tell me what you think of my singing. I'd value your opinion." What happened during that recording session would haunt Margaret for the rest of her life. Elvis's voice, raw and untrained but filled with a power that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his young years, filled the small studio and transformed everything Margaret thought she knew about music. When he finished "My Happiness," the silence that followed was so profound that Margaret could hear her own heartbeat. Sam Phillips, the studio owner, had been in the control room, and Margaret could see through the glass that he was as stunned as she was. This wasn't just another aspiring singer, this was something unprecedented, something that would change the world. When Elvis emerged from the booth, his face flushed with nervous energy, Margaret couldn't find words to express what she had just witnessed. "Well?" Elvis asked anxiously. "How was it?" Margaret looked into his hopeful eyes and realized she was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of her life. "Elvis," she said slowly, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. You're going to be famous someday. Really famous." Elvis's face lit up with a joy so pure that Margaret felt tears spring to her eyes. "You really think so?" Before Margaret could answer, Sam Phillips burst out of the control room with an excitement she had never seen from the usually reserved businessman. "Son," Sam said, grabbing Elvis by the shoulders, "I want you to come back here tomorrow. I want to record you properly. I think you might just be what I've been looking for." What happened next would become the moment that Margaret would replay in her mind for 60 years. Elvis turned to her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Margaret, I know this might sound crazy, but I feel like you understood something about my music that nobody else has. Would you maybe like to have dinner with me tonight? I'd love to talk to someone who really gets what I'm trying to do." Margaret felt the world shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just a date invitation. This was Elvis Presley, who was about to become the biggest star in the world, asking her to be part of his journey. She could see the future stretching out before them. Touring the country, watching him perform for crowds of screaming fans, being part of music history as it was being made. But before she could answer, the studio door opened and Adam Phillips walked in. 21 years old, wearing his army dress uniform and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers, Adam had just returned from basic training and had come straight to Margaret's workplace to surprise her. They had been dating for 2 years, ever since they were teenagers, and Adam had been planning to propose as soon as he saved enough money for a ring. "Margaret," Adam called out, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Surprise, I got leave for the weekend, and I wanted to—" His voice trailed off as he noticed Elvis standing beside Margaret, saw the way they were looking at each other, and sensed the electricity in the air between them. Adam was a smart man, and he immediately understood that he had walked into something significant. Elvis looked between Margaret and Adam, his expression shifting from hopeful to understanding to gracefully defeated. "I'm sorry," Elvis said quietly. "I didn't realize you had someone special in your life." Margaret felt her heart breaking as she looked at Adam, then at Elvis, then back at Adam. She was standing between two futures, one with the boy she had grown up loving, who represented safety and stability and everything she had always dreamed of in a normal life, and one with a young man whose voice could move mountains, who was destined for greatness but whose life would be anything but normal. "Elvis, Margaret began, but Adam stepped forward with the quiet dignity that would characterize him for the rest of his life. "Sir, I'm Adam Phillips," he said, extending his hand to Elvis. "I've been dating Margaret for 2 years, and I love her very much. But if she has feelings for you, I won't stand in her way. I just want her to be happy." Elvis shook Adam's hand, studying his face with respect. "You're a good man, Adam Phillips. Margaret is lucky to have someone who loves her that much." He turned to Margaret, and for a moment, she saw in his eyes all the music they would never make together, all the adventures they would never share, all the love that could have been. "Margaret," Elvis said softly, "I need to know right now. If you come with me, your life will never be normal. It'll be exciting and probably wonderful, but it'll also be complicated and unpredictable. If you stay with Adam, you'll have something real and solid and lasting. I can see in his eyes that he'll love you forever. The question is, what do you want?" Margaret looked at these two men, both of whom represented everything she could want in life, and made the decision that would echo through the next 60 years. She walked to Adam, took his hand and said quietly, "I want a love that will last forever. I want someone who will still be holding my hand when we're old and gray. I want the kind of man who would come here straight from the train station just to surprise me with flowers." Elvis nodded slowly, his smile sad but genuine. "Then you've chosen wisely," he said. "Adam, you're getting the most wonderful woman in the world. Take care of her." As Elvis headed toward the door, he paused and looked back at Margaret one last time. "If you ever change your mind, if you ever want to see what could have been, just listen to my music. I'll put everything I'm feeling for you into every song I sing, and someday when I'm performing Love Me Tender, I'll be thinking about the girl in Memphis who understood my music before anyone else did." After Elvis left, Margaret collapsed into Adam's arms, sobbing with the weight of the choice she had just made. Adam held her gently, not asking questions, not demanding explanations, just providing the steady, unconditional love that would define their marriage for the next 6 decades. 3 months later, Adam proposed to Margaret with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. They were married on June 15, 1955, in a small church in Tupelo, Mississippi, surrounded by family and friends who had no idea that the bride had once been offered a chance to be part of music history. Their first dance was to Love Me Tender, which had just been released and was climbing the charts. As they swayed together in the church basement, Margaret whispered to Adam, "This is our song now. Whatever it meant before, it belongs to us now." Adam, who had never learned the full story of Margaret's encounter with Elvis, simply held her closer and whispered back, "Everything I have belongs to you, Margaret. Always." For 60 years, Margaret kept her secret. She and Adam built a beautiful life together. 3 children, 7 grandchildren, successful careers, and a love story that served as an inspiration to everyone who knew them. Margaret became the teacher she had always dreamed of being, touching the lives of hundreds of students over her 40-year career. Adam built a successful construction business and provided the stable, loving home that Margaret had chosen over the uncertainty of life with a future superstar. But Elvis's music was always there, threading through their lives like a soundtrack to their love story. Margaret would sometimes catch herself humming "Love Me Tender" while cooking dinner, or singing along to "Can't Help Falling in Love" on the radio while folding laundry. Adam never questioned her obvious affection for Elvis's music. He simply accepted it as part of who she was, never knowing that every song held a memory of the road not taken. When Elvis died in 1977, Margaret cried for 3 days. Adam held her while she grieved, thinking she was mourning the loss of a cultural icon, never realizing she was mourning the death of the boy who had offered her the world and whom she had loved enough to let go. The years passed peacefully for Margaret and Adam. They traveled, they spoiled their grandchildren, they grew old together with the quiet contentment of people who had chosen love over excitement and never regretted their decision. Margaret's memory remained sharp well into her 70s, filled with 60 years of precious moments with the man who had proven every day that she had made the right choice. But in 2021, when Margaret was 81, Adam noticed the first signs that something was wrong. Margaret would forget appointments, lose her keys, ask him the same question multiple times in a day. At first, they both dismissed it as normal aging, but the symptoms gradually worsened until a neurologist delivered the devastating diagnosis: early-stage Alzheimer's disease. The progression was cruel and relentless. Margaret, who had been sharp and articulate her entire life, began losing pieces of herself one memory at a time. She forgot the names of her grandchildren, then her children, then eventually Adam himself. The woman who had been his partner, his best friend, his entire world for 6 decades, began looking at him like a stranger who had somehow invaded her home. But the cruelest twist of all was that while Margaret forgot everything else, Elvis's music remained crystal clear in her mind. She could sing every word of every song with perfect pitch and flawless memory, even when she couldn't remember Adam's name or recognize his face. It was as if Elvis's prediction had come true. His music had become the repository for everything Margaret had felt for him, and somehow her brain protected those memories while letting everything else slip away. Adam watched this phenomenon with a mixture of amazement and heartbreak. The woman who couldn't remember their wedding day could recite every lyric Elvis had ever recorded. The woman who asked him 10 times a day who he was could sing "Love Me Tender" with the same passion she had shown as a 19-year-old girl falling in love for the first time. It was their daughter Sarah who suggested the concert. "Dad," she said during one of her weekly visits, "I've been reading about music therapy for Alzheimer's patients. Sometimes familiar songs can trigger memories, bring people back to themselves temporarily. Maybe if Mom heard Elvis perform live." Adam had initially resisted the idea. At 87, he was exhausted from caring for Margaret, and the thought of taking her to a crowded Las Vegas showroom seemed overwhelming. But as Margaret's condition continued to deteriorate, as she became more agitated and confused with each passing day, Adam realized he was willing to try anything to reach the woman he was losing. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was taking his wife to see an Elvis impersonator, not the real Elvis who had died decades earlier, but one of the many performers who made their living recreating the magic of the king. Adam had no way of knowing that this particular tribute artist, Johnny Rivers, had studied every nuance of Elvis's performance style and could replicate not just the voice and movements, but somehow the emotional essence of what made Elvis special. On the night of November 8, 1975, Adam had dressed Margaret in her favorite blue dress, the one he had bought her for their 50th anniversary, and carefully applied her makeup the way she had always worn it. Margaret had submitted to these ministrations with the passive confusion that had become her default state, asking repeatedly who they were going to see and why they were getting dressed up. "We're going to hear some music, sweetheart," Adam had told her gently. "Music you love." "I love music," Margaret had replied, though she couldn't remember what kind of music she enjoyed or why it mattered to her. Now, sitting in the 3rd row of the International Hotel's showroom, Adam watched as the tribute artist took the stage in a white rhinestone jumpsuit that caught the lights and threw sparkles across the audience. The performer's voice was remarkably close to Elvis's, and when he began singing "That's All Right," the crowd responded with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for the real thing. But Margaret sat motionless, staring at the stage with no recognition, no response, no connection to the music that had once meant everything to her. Adam felt his heart sink as he realized that this desperate gamble had failed. The woman beside him was too far gone, too lost in the fog of Alzheimer's to be reached even by the music that had once defined a crucial moment in her life. Then the tribute artist announced his next song. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to slow things down a bit with a song that's very special to me. This is for all the couples out there who understand what real love means. The opening notes of Love Me Tender filled the showroom, and something miraculous happened. Margaret's head snapped up as if she had been struck by lightning. Her back straightened, her eyes cleared, and for the first time in months, Adam saw the woman he had married looking back at him with complete awareness and recognition. "Adam," she whispered, her voice strong and clear. "Adam, is that you?" Adam felt tears streaming down his face as he reached for her hand. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me. I'm here." Margaret looked around the showroom with wonder, taking in the crowds, the lights, the performer on stage singing their song. "We're at an Elvis concert," she said with amazement. "How did we get here?" "I brought you," Adam said softly. "I thought the music might help you remember." Margaret listened to the song for a moment, her face reflecting a complex mixture of emotions. Then she turned to Adam with an expression of such love and clarity that it took his breath away. "I need to tell you something," she said urgently, as if she understood that this moment of lucidity might not last long. "I need to tell you about Elvis." For the next 10 minutes, as the tribute artist continued his performance, Margaret told Adam the story she had kept secret for 60 years. She told him about working at Sun Records, about meeting Elvis before he was famous, about the choice she had made between two different futures. She told him about Elvis's offer, about the life of excitement and uncertainty she had turned down, about the promise Elvis had made to put his feelings for her into every song he sang. Adam listened with growing amazement, not just at the story itself but at the fact that Margaret was telling it with perfect clarity and detail, as if the music had unlocked a door in her mind that had been sealed for decades. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Adam asked gently. Margaret smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart when they were teenagers. "Because it didn't matter," she said simply. "I chose you, Adam. I chose our life together. Elvis was a beautiful dream, but you were my reality. You were my choice, and it was the right choice." As Love Me Tender came to an end, Adam saw the fog beginning to return to Margaret's eyes. The moment of clarity was fading. The miraculous connection that the music had created was starting to dissolve, but before she slipped away again, Margaret gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Dance with me," she whispered, "like we did at our wedding. Please, Adam, while I can still remember who you are." Without hesitation, Adam stood and helped Margaret to her feet. Right there in the third row of the Las Vegas showroom, surrounded by hundreds of strangers, an 87-year-old man and his 85-year-old wife began to dance to the music that had defined their love story for 60 years. The tribute artist, noticing the elderly couple swaying together in the audience, made a decision that would make this performance unforgettable for everyone present. He stepped down from the stage, walked over to Adam and Margaret, and continued singing Love Me Tender just for them, his voice carrying all the tenderness and emotion that the original had held all those years ago. The entire audience fell silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something sacred. Here was love in its purest form, a man who had devoted his life to caring for a woman who no longer remembered his name, and a woman who had chosen stability over stardom and never looked back. Here was proof that some promises are worth keeping, that some choices define not just individual lives, but the very meaning of commitment itself. As the song ended, Margaret looked up at Adam with eyes that were already beginning to cloud again. "I love you," she whispered, and Adam could hear in her voice that she was trying to hold on to the moment, trying to fight against the darkness that was already starting to reclaim her. "I love you too, sweetheart," Adam replied, "always and forever." By the time they returned to their seats, Margaret was asking again who he was and why they were there. The magical moment had passed. The door that music had briefly opened was closed again, and Adam was once more a stranger caring for a woman who lived in a world he couldn't reach. But something had changed in Adam during those precious minutes of clarity. For 60 years he had wondered if Margaret ever regretted her choice, if she ever wished she had chosen the excitement of life with Elvis over the predictability of marriage to a small-town construction worker. Now he knew the truth. Margaret had chosen him with her eyes wide open, understanding exactly what she was giving up and exactly what she was gaining. The drive home from Las Vegas was quiet, with Margaret staring out the window at the desert landscape without recognition or interest. But Adam found himself humming Love Me Tender under his breath, and for the first time since Margaret's diagnosis, he felt something that resembled peace. Over the following months, Adam began playing Elvis's music for Margaret every day, hoping to recreate the magical moment they had shared at the concert. Sometimes it worked. Briefly, partially, and Margaret would surface from her confusion long enough to squeeze his hand or smile at a familiar melody. These moments never lasted long. but they were enough to sustain Adam through the difficult days when Margaret didn't recognize him at all. The neurologist explained that music often remains accessible to Alzheimer's patients long after other memories have been lost, because musical memories are stored in different parts of the brain than other types of memories. But Adam preferred to think of it differently. He believed that Elvis had kept his promise from 1954, that he had put so much love and emotion into his music that it had become a bridge across time, connecting the girl Margaret had been to the woman she was becoming. As Margaret's condition continued to deteriorate, Adam made a decision that surprised their children. Instead of placing her in a specialized care facility as the doctors recommended, he chose to care for her at home, with the help of professional nurses and a sound system that played Elvis's music throughout the house 24 hours a day. "Dad, this is too much for you," their son Michael protested during a family meeting. "Mom needs professional care around the clock. You're exhausting yourself." But Adam was adamant. "She chose me 60 years ago," he said simply. "She chose our life together over something that might have been more exciting but less certain. The least I can do is choose her now, when she needs me most." The last 2 years of Margaret's life were a testament to the power of love to transcend understanding. She rarely recognized Adam, almost never spoke coherently, and required constant care for even the most basic needs. But every afternoon, when Adam played Love Me Tender on the stereo in their living room, something would shift in her expression. She couldn't say his name or remember their history together, but somehow the music connected them across the vast emptiness that Alzheimer's had created. Margaret died on a Tuesday morning in March 2024, with Adam holding her hand and Elvis singing softly in the background. Her last coherent word was "Adam," spoken so quietly that he almost missed it, but clear enough to let him know that somewhere, in whatever remained of her consciousness, she still knew who he was. At Margaret's funeral, Adam played Love Me Tender as her casket was lowered into the ground. As the music filled the cemetery, he thought about the choice she had made 60 years earlier, the life they had built together, and the love that had sustained them through 6 decades of joy and sorrow, health and sickness, memory and forgetting. After the service, as friends and family gathered to share memories of Margaret, Adam found himself thinking about Elvis Presley, the young man who had offered Margaret the world and gracefully accepted her refusal. Elvis had died in 1977, never knowing that his music would become the thread connecting an elderly couple through the final devastating years of Alzheimer's disease. But Adam believed that somehow, somewhere, Elvis knew. He believed that the boy who had promised to put his feelings into every song he sang had kept that promise in ways he never could have imagined. Margaret had chosen Adam over Elvis, but in the end it was Elvis's music that had allowed their love to survive even when memory failed. 6 months after Margaret's death, Adam was cleaning out her jewelry box when he found something that took his breath away. A letter, yellowed with age, addressed to Elvis Presley and dated June 15, 19. Dear Elvis, today I'm marrying Adam Phillips, the man I love more than life itself. But I wanted you to know that meeting you changed something in me, showed me that love comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most beautiful thing about love is knowing when to let it go. I hope you find someone who can give you what I couldn't, someone who can be part of your extraordinary life without losing herself in it. Thank you for understanding why I had to choose Adam. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to love someone enough to want their happiness more than your own. I will never forget you, and I will carry the music you make in my heart for the rest of my life. Love always, Margaret. Adam read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face as he understood the full depth of what Margaret had sacrificed for their life together. She had not only chosen him over Elvis, she had spent their entire marriage protecting his feelings, never telling him about the magnitude of what she had given up, never making him feel like a consolation prize for a bigger dream that didn't work out. That evening, Adam sat in his empty house and played Love Me Tender one more time. As Elvis's voice filled the room where he and Margaret had danced on countless ordinary evenings, Adam whispered a thank you to the young man who had gracefully accepted defeat 60 years earlier, and whose music had ultimately become the soundtrack to their enduring love. The story of Adam and Margaret Phillips serves as a reminder that love is not always about passion and excitement, but sometimes about choice and commitment and the willingness to build something beautiful with another person one day at a time. Their love story proves that the most extraordinary romance can be found in the most ordinary moments, and that sometimes the greatest love songs are not the ones that make us dream of what could be, but the ones that help us remember what we have chosen to cherish. Margaret's Alzheimer's stole many things from her and Adam, but it could not steal the essential truth of their 60-year love affair, that she had chosen him freely, completely and without reservation. Elvis's music had preserved that truth like amber preserves ancient insects, keeping it perfect and unchanged even as everything else faded away. In the end, Adam understood that he had not been Margaret's second choice or her safe option. He had been her deliberate choice, her conscious decision to build a life based on steady love rather than thrilling uncertainty. And when Alzheimer's threatened to erase the evidence of that choice, Elvis's music had stepped in to remind them both that love, once chosen and nurtured and protected, becomes strong enough to survive even when memory fails. The final irony of their story was that Elvis, the man Margaret had not chosen, became the guardian of the love she had chosen instead. His music served as a bridge across the terrible isolation of Alzheimer's, proof that love transcends understanding, memory, and even recognition. In the end, Elvis had given Margaret and Adam something far more valuable than fame or excitement. He had given them a way to find each other again, when all other paths had been lost to time and disease. Today, in the small cemetery where Margaret rests, visitors often report hearing the faint sound of "Love Me Tender" carried on the wind. Whether it's imagination, coincidence, or something more mysterious, the music serves as a reminder that some love stories are so powerful they become eternal, and that sometimes the most beautiful endings are the ones where everyone gets exactly what they needed, even if it's not what they originally wanted.